Hello, everyone. Right, make yourself comfortable. We'll be starting in 1 minute. So this is the time for everybody to log in and settle down, and we'll be moving on in a moment. Hello, Rashmi. And Miranda from Georgia. Nice to have you in the webinar, right? I can see, and there's a hello from Vietnam also. So that's very nice to have you here. Right. And a hello from Ukraine, from Elena. Great. And Serbia. Turkey and Australia, right? So this is quite, and Bulgaria, Azerbaijan, right? So Philippines, great. So we, it seems we have a really international audience today with us. Good. So I think it is just the time to start. I am Camille Patrick, as you can see in your screens. I'm a Pearson master trainer, and as you can see, we're going to discuss today some about embracing challenges for PTE academic. Just a little bit about me, myself. My role with Pearson is to provide training for test centers, training connected with different Pearson qualifications. Today we are meeting for PTE Academic. I'm based in Poland, and my other role is also a university teacher. I teach at university. I work with people, especially postgraduate students who will master the skills as far as academic life is concerned. So I prepare them from the English point of view, from the English side for their academic life. So what I'm doing today, I'm going to talk a little bit about embracing speaking challenges. What I will say is based obviously on PT Academic, because we're discussing the issues in the context of PT Academic, in the context of getting students ready for the exam, but also I'm going to share a little bit of my experience as an academic teacher, working with academic English, working with students of various departments, ranging from business departments up to, I also have this year I have a group of postgraduate physics students. So I teach various postgraduate students. So let's start with, because we're discussing in the context of PT Academic, the specific qualification aimed at those who, are going, especially are going to join university, are going to enter the academic community. I want to have a look at at the beginning, at some general problems or challenges for test taking. And one more thing before I move on, obviously you have the chat box open. There's also a Q&A box. So if you have any questions, especially those questions connected with the administration of the test, there is Sophie with us behind the scenes who is monitoring Q&A, and she will be answering any questions about the administrative part of the exam. You can also use the chat window. I'm monitoring the chat. I will be looking at it. If there are any questions and issues in the chat, I'll be trying to raise them. I'll be trying to address them. And also after the webinar, after the meeting, I will address some questions that might appear in this Q&A. So feel free to use the boxes, the chat box and the Q&A box. Good. Let's get back to test taking, generally test taking and the challenges, some elements that might discourage our students from taking the test or from learning towards a test. And well, I have selected, probably there are a few of those. I have selected the four that I consider to be the most common elements that can discourage students, the challenges as far as test taking is concerned. And this is the test format. The lack of knowledge of the test format might be discouraging and might somehow cause problems, might be a challenge for the test takers. Then, well, the motivation as such, right? So they might find it hard to get motivated to learn for the test, to learn and to take part in the test. The language itself, right? So at some point they might feel discouraged that there is so much language to learn that for the test, for example, that they simply won't make it, and they get discouraged, and they do not follow, and they do not get to the test. And the last most common, for me, challenge is the pressure. They feel the pressure and they feel under stress, under pressure. And this is also an element that can make it really difficult to get ready for the test. And what about our reaction as teachers, as those whose role is to help them, to assist the students, to support the students on their way to the test? When it comes to test format, obviously, the teacher's role here would be to provide your students with test-taking strategies, help them, let them see the test, and tell them which strategies are the best to succeed at the test. Then motivation, how to work on motivation, how to get your students motivated when it comes to classes preparing for the test. Well, probably a good way would be to provide engaging, relevant materials, some materials that contain some element of fun, maybe competition, to make classes really motivating. As far as the language is concerned, the teacher's role will be obviously to provide vocabulary, practice sub-skills, the sub-skills tested in particular tasks. This is the role for the teacher. And as far as the pressure is concerned, pressure connected with the test taking or with pressure connected with hoping to succeed in the test, well, the teacher's role is to provide positive environment, to make classes interesting, make classes vivid, and also to provide general positive learning environment, to show them that, well, obviously they're learning the language here, not only for the test. So, so they're learning a new skill, something that will enable them to communicate. So these are the four most important challenges when it comes to test taking from the point of view of the learner. Today, we obviously are focusing on speaking. So I will be focusing on some speaking challenges that might appear on the way towards the test. And there will be three that have been signaled in the abstract, the three challenges that I like to discuss as far as speaking is concerned, and how you can embrace those. So challenge number one, let's have a look at it. So when it comes to speaking in a test situation, students may feel they have difficulty with pronunciation, proper sounds, stress, and intonation patterns. And how to embrace this challenge. I'd like to have a look at the methods of embracing this challenge with the help of some tasks from PTE Academic. Obviously, we're going to discuss those speaking tasks today. So let's start with read aloud, the first speaking task. Well, Those of you with experience in PT academic, you know that there is a task in which a text appears on the screen, and the test takers have to read the text aloud from the screen. This is the task that is assessed according to 3 criteria. There is oral fluency criterion. Obviously, all assessment is done by some algorithms, by artificial intelligence. So the read aloud task will be and the oral fluency in read aloud task will be assessed as far as the rhythm, phrasing, and stress. Are they smooth enough? Is there a constant and natural rate of speech with appropriate phrasing? Are there any hesitations, repetitions, and false starts, which may some take the score down, for example, for read aloud? So that's what is tested as far as oral fluency is concerned. Pronunciation is also tested, is also assessed here. And is what they say easily understandable? Are vowels and consonants pronounced native-like way? And are words and phrases stressed correctly? So these are the elements that are assessed. There's also content, obviously, if there are any replacement, omissions, and insertions present in what they read. But obviously here we're going to focus on pronunciation especially, and that will be crucial for read aloud because, well, they have a relatively short text to read out and they really have to show that the pronunciation is at a good level. So some strategies with which you can help your students get ready, especially for read aloud, but generally to show off the pronunciation and to show off that they really excel at this criterion. So the strategies, use punctuation and grammar to identify pauses, teach them, show them how they can, if they have a piece of text, how they can divide it into chunks, into some sensible chunks. Typically, grammar and punctuation will help them, and practice that with that. I will discuss that in a moment. Show them how to apply sound knowledge. Obviously, there are a lot of irregularities as far as English is concerned, but there are still some elements that are pretty regular as far as this connection between the letter and the sound are concerned. Show them that, help them with this, especially focus on those regularities. Show them how important it is to emphasize, not to emphasize grammar words, like to use so-called weak forms so that they do not pronounce clearly every single word, because this is simply unnatural for native speakers, and this is not the way they speak. So show them those words that are not pronounced in full, as if to say, and show them how they can link the words within phrases, because this is how native speakers do it. They simply, they do not pronounce words separately. They link words, and show them where they can link the words. So just a few activities that might help you to get them ready and work on those strategies that I mentioned there. And just to refer to a few questions in the chat before I move on. How much is the content scored in read aloud? There is this question. Obviously, any insertion, any replacement, any omission will be calculated as a mistake, and it will take the score down. So this is how content is assessed. Simply speaking, the text pronounced must be exactly the same as the text in writing. Coming back to the activities, if you work with students of academic English, so for example, when I work with my students in my academic English classes, I do a lot of reading, right? We have a lot of texts. within the field that my students are studying. So obviously you will have a lot of material from which you can select some short pieces of reading, so short pieces of reading comprehension activities. You can find a lot of those, not very long, but short, and take those pieces and you work with the pieces and work on the strategies that I mentioned. So for example, take a short piece of reading, not a very long, like up to 50 words at the maximum, because if you make it too long, they will be, they will get distracted. So you focus on some specific words, so it's easier when you have a short text. So, for example, you take a text and show them that how they can divide the text in thought groups. Show them how commas, full stops can help them with that. Not necessarily. Sometimes grammar simply helps. And here they, for example, can read out the text, and they can even overemphasize the breaks between the thought groups. So practice short reading, take the text that you typically use with academic English classes and work this way. So show and divide text into thought groups. Another another activity that you can, well, carry out with short text that you take from your regular, for example, in academic English classes, take a text and mark the words that can be linked, especially those, show them the connections between consonants and vowels. So, for example, we do not say economists come in, but we say economists come in, right? Because and get together here as a consonant and vowel, and ask them to work with the text this way, like they show you which the places are, where the places are that can be connected, all those come in, shapes and sizes, not all of them. So those chunks of words that, well, naturally would go together, especially when there is this consonant vowel boundary. Another thing that you can do working on short text that you take from your academic English, work with them and show them weak forms and unstressed syllables, how they work. So give them the text and ask them to underline and show you all those words that will be pronounced in a weak form, in a weak way. Like you don't pronounce and, but and, you don't pronounce of, but of, and show them how natural this is. Work with by working with those short texts. Right, and another activity that will introduce some elements, maybe of fun, of some extra motivation into your classroom, and at the same time activity in which they have to read aloud, where they have to concentrate on pronunciation, where they have to concentrate on proper sounds, proper stress, proper rhythm. Is activity in which they have to record voice messages. So for example, if you have any homework that you set to your students, consider using recorded messages. So instead of students, like, for example, writing the sentence and bringing the sentence in, for example, or a few sentences, ask your students to record voice messages and send them to you. So that will be a little bit different way of approaching usual stuff that you do. But at the same time, they get used to this equipment, to talking to a microphone, some elements that they will come across in the examination. So think which activities you could change into, for example, recording voice messages rather than writing to you, something to you. Another activity that can introduce an element of fun into your classroom. I use this activity sometimes. This is I call it a quotation game. depending on what kind of group I have, if I have a group of students that are following the same program, like postgraduate physics students, so then I Google, for example, famous quotations by famous physicists, and I bring a few quotations by famous physicists. And one student gets a list of quotations. If I have a mixed group, because I also teach some general academic classes where I have people from various areas, from various fields, then what I could do, I could do this activity in a general way, like you can make famous film quotations, for example, right? So so that you can work with this activity in a group of a mixed background. And they get a list of quotations, famous quotations. They have to read out the quotations. They have to focus on the pronunciation so that the other student can understand. And the other student obviously guesses who said that, or what film, for example, if this is a film quotation, what film it is taken from. Just a short activity to start your class, to finish your class, but it involves exactly what the skills that are necessary, sub-skills that are necessary for your read aloud class. Read aloud task in the examination. They have to read aloud some sentences at the same time, focusing on the pronunciation, because obviously the other students have to understand properly the quotation. If you take, for example, quotations from famous, I don't know, physicists or biologists, depending on what group you're teaching, then additionally some specific ESP, so specific vocabulary might appear, and you can work also on some vocabulary in the quotations. Right, and another activity that might introduce the element of fun, right, and might make it the class a little bit more motivating, less formal maybe at some point. You can take a short piece of reading comprehension, just as we looked at, not a very long one, and look for some relatively fixed collocations in the text. That could be a text that you're going to work with, for example, a piece of a text that you're going to work with in this class, for example. So you can start your class with this as a warm-up. So find places where there are, well, relatively fixed collocations, and put some dots into the places where you have some collocations or relatively fixed phrases. And you give the text to one student. Obviously, the other student cannot see the text, and one of the students is reading out the text, stopping at the points, at the bullets, I would say, bullet points that you have inserted into the text. And the idea is that the other student is guessing what follows, the word that might follow. Obviously, in some cases, it will be a little bit easier. In some cases, it will be a little bit more difficult, but you practice this reading aloud, proper pronunciation, so that the other student can understand the sentences and can try and guess. And so they go through the part of the text. You have a great introduction into the text, for example, that you're going to read, because they have got engaged in the text, right? This is also my problem in my academic English classes, because we typically work with lengthy texts, and they can, the students, some of them easily get bored with the text, right? And they get distracted. So with this little bit competitive activity, you start the text, you introduce the text, and you get them engaged in that. At the same time, you practice some read aloud sub skills. Another activity that could be for read aloud, or generally an activity in which they might work on pronunciation, in which they will embrace the the first challenge of speaking, which is making sure you pronounce words and your pronunciation is good enough. So this is an activity in which you might use dice. 2 dice actually would be necessary for that. Well, you can make the dice on your own from a template, or you can easily buy whiteboard dice, right? So this, you can see that in the screen. So these could be easily accessible. They are typically used with young learners, but they are very good tool for adult learners as well. You can use those whiteboard dice in many different ways. You simply write something on each face of the dice, and then you can easily erase it, right? So that's why this is very useful, because you can apply to many activities. So you will need 2 dice like that, and you focus on 2 sounds. We're discussing pronunciation here, working on pronunciation. These could be long and short, A and E, like, I know, bit and beat, right, which is a problem in my place. Obviously, all regions, in your regions, you might have completely different pronunciation problems when it comes to English pronunciation. So you might focus on some other target sounds. Probably one of my target sounds with my students would be this, like long, short, E, bit, beat. And well, you play the game in groups, 3 or 4 students, one on each person's turn. This person will roll 2 dice. The dice will contain some words with short and long E. Just as you can see in the template, like feast, fist, bean, bin, sleep, slip, something like that. So this person that is rolling the dice is going to, when the person rolls the dice, they will read the words from the dice. Obviously, the other people in the group cannot see the dice, so you can use some old cardboard, for example, to cover the dice. And the group has to decide if the words contain the same vowel sound or not, right? And so they, for example, can get points for giving the correct answer. So you have a little bit of competition here, and a little bit of element of fun. Another activity to play to work on pronunciation would be played in pairs. Each pair gets 2 numbered lists of words. The words, some of the words are, as you can see in the screen, some of the words are the same, but some contain some minimal pairs. Then again, you can focus on the minimal pairs that are especially important in your region, especially important with your students. And well, students simply read out particular words, like, so word number 1, they read out, they don't see each other's lists, obviously, and they read out word 1, and they have to decide if the word that they are reading is the same word on both lists, or this is different word. This is a minimal pair, for example. So this way they focus on the sounds, which is one of the elements of that is assessed in all speaking activities, actually, in PTE academic. Right. And another activity, also changing a little bit the way you work. Why not trying and speaking with a short audio passage? For example, you have some listening comprehension that you work with your students, or you're planning to work with your students, and you take a short passage from your listening comprehension. If you're working with an e-book, for example, then typically you have audio script. Otherwise, if you're working with some original listening, which is my case very often, so then it will mean a little bit more work, because you have to prepare the audio script. Typically, you do not have the audio script if you work with some authentic material. So you play the passage for students, they hear the passage, and then you give students the transcript, and you play again the passage, and you have them speak along with the passage, so they can hear the pronunciation, hear the sounds being produced, and they can at the same time imitate the sounds. So that's also a nice activity which puts this read aloud or this focus on pronunciation from a little bit different perspective. That brings me to challenge number 2, which is just as in the abstract, students may have difficulty with fluency or the ability to speak smoothly and easily without hesitation or repeated pauses. This is another challenge that they face, and here I will focus on 2 tasks from PTE academic, namely repeat sentence and retell a lecture, where well, this speaking smoothly without hesitation, repeated pauses would be some kind of challenge. And there is a remark from Miranda that short audios are really helpful to develop speaking skills. Obviously, that's absolutely true. Thank you, Miranda, for that. So repeat sentence, the task of after listening to recording of a sentence, test takers repeat the sentence. Well, so this is as simple as that. And again, the criteria that are tested here is oral fluency, is that constant and natural rate of speech, smooth rhythm, stress, phrasing, are there any hesitations, repetitions, and false starts? That's oral fluency that is tested. Pronunciation, is it easily understandable? Vowels and consonants are pronounced native-like way or not? Words and phrases expressed correctly or not, right? These are the elements of pronunciation that are assessed. And content, well, obviously, does the response include all the words in the sentence and only these words? So there can't be any repetitions, omissions, replacement, omissions, and insertions. So strategies for repeat the sentence, obviously teach your students to focus on understanding and reconstructing what is heard, not mechanical repetition, because they won't be able probably to repeat mechanically. These are relatively long sentences, and well, they can mechanically repeat up to 5, maybe 6 elements, but if the sentence is longer, they won't be able to repeat it mechanically. They have to understand, and after understanding, reconstruct the sentence, show them that and teach them that. The understanding will be helped or assisted by listening for chunks. Show them how they can listen for chunks. They don't listen to individual words, but they listen to groups of words, and they understand the groups of words, and show them that this is a very useful strategy for this kind of task. The sentence structure, right? Where the main subject is, where the action, the verb is, how the sentence is organized, that also will help to understand the whole of it. Well, this is some extra linguistic skill, but here it's very important that they stay focused. I've tried this activity a few times just to put myself into my students' shoes, and I have noticed that my biggest problem is to keep focused for the duration of the sentence, right? So not to get distracted, because you can easily get distracted with different elements, and here it's very important that you do not get distracted, because you lose out on some elements in the sentence. And obviously pronounce words, and this is what we have been discussing. Pronounce words clearly. Don't forget about word and sentence stress. So this pronunciation is also important here. So some activities for this repeat sentence, and not only, also to improve this smooth, fluent speech. Well, if you work with some books, for example, there are often some pronunciation activities that focus on stress within a sentence. You can use these with your students and have your students read sentences to one another and ask them to repeat. As simple as that. But if you're working on pronunciation, if your book provides some material, you will find a lot of individual sentences that you can practice and then ask them to to repeat. There's a question from Abdullah, if you shuffle words in a repeat sentence, will it affect the score? Obviously it will affect, because it's not exactly the same. And besides, if you shuffle words, well, in most cases, you will change the idea of the sentence. As you know, English is this language with relatively fixed word order, where it's really important in which place you can see the words. So shuffling obviously will take score down. So thank you for your question here. If you work with texts, with some books, for example, I have taken this text from University Success by Pearson. You can find a lot of short text, and not only from books, also from the authentic material that you use in class, in your academic English class. A great activity for listen and repeat is this race. Well, I maybe should call it Chinese whispers, because it's based on the idea of Chinese whispers. You give a text to a group, so one person in a group is holding the text, is reading the text. The others cannot see the text. And this person who is holding the text is reading out the text sentence by sentence, and so it goes through the group. So it's repeated by every member of the groups until it reaches the last member, who simply writes down, puts down the word. And then obviously you can do it for time, so to introduce this time factor, obviously to introduce some competition here. And at the end, you can penalize them for every wrong word, for example. So there's a lot of, well, listening, obviously, but we're not focusing on listening today, but there's also a lot of listening and repeating. So pronunciation and fluency are important elements in this Chinese whispers. Another activity that focuses on pronunciation and fluency, and it will be good for repeat sentence. You divide students into two teams. One student from each team comes to the front of the room or to the front of the group. The student gets a sentence. You can take a sentence from your academic English classes. So successful applicants will work with a large team of researchers, for example. And you ask this student who gets the sentence, that's a mystery sentence, you ask the student to communicate some emotion with this sentence. For example, surprise, disappointment, frustration. This way, you force them to use inflection, intonation, to convey the intent or emotion behind the words. So they work, and you can monitor that, you can help them how intonation can improve, can show, for example, the emotion through the same words. And obviously, this is competitive. The other team guesses the emotion, and obviously, you can run it as a race, as a competition. Teams will compete, which, for example, guesses first all the mystery emotions, not sentences, but emotions. Another activity in PT Academic, retell lecture, where well, it's necessary to embrace some speaking challenges, especially the challenge of fluency and fluent speaking. Would be a retell lecture, where after listening to or watching a lecture, test takers tell the lecture in their own words, simply speaking, so they do not repeat anything, they use their own words. And the traits being assessed here are obviously the same as previously, so oral fluency, rate of speech, rhythm, stress, phrasing, or possible hesitations, repetitions, and false starts. Pronunciation is also assessed. So is it understandable? Are vowels and consonants pronounced native-like? And are words and phrases stressed correctly? And content. Here, the content is important. They get a few more points for content. So is the situation, characters, aspects, actions, developments conveyed properly? Are there any descriptions of relationships, possible developments, or are there any conclusions or implications? This is what is tested, what is assessed in retell lecture. And the strategies for this retell lecture based on what elements are assessed. Obviously, they will be able to take down, to take notes during listening. So concentrate on key words, do not take down all the lecture, because this is what you do in real lectures. You take down some keywords for later, like reconstructing what you have heard. So take down, teach them how to identify keywords, how they can take them down and use them later. These words will be used as framework for what they say. Teach them or show them how they can learn a lot of reporting verbs, because this is what they're going to do. They're going to use a lot of reporting verbs, and teach them to organize a talk so that there is a clear introduction into this retelling, then the main body, and some kind of conclusion at the end. So teach them to make this talking meaningful, so that these are not like disjointed phrases, a collection of disjointed phrases, but this is as a whole, that the talk that they provide constructs the lecture, or retells the lecture as it really was. And obviously teach them to always leave a few seconds to conclude, right? So to wrap up what they say, because that has to be organized. And an activity to work towards a retell lecture, a very popular activity, hidden sentence that you can, with which you can, well, spice up a little bit your class. Again, introduce some element of competition or fun. One student in a group comes to the front of the group, and they get a sentence. That's a mystery sentence again. And after that, you give the student in the front, you give them the topic, right? For example, tell the student they have to talk about a lecture titled "New Developments in Physics." So, for example, you can take topics that you're currently covering in your class, right? For example. And what they have to do, they have to report, right? So they have to talk about an imaginary lecture titled "New Developments in Physics." So they give the report to the group of an imaginary lecture, and they have to use the sentence in the report, and they hide the sentence, and the rest of the group, they have to guess which sentence have been hidden in the report. So this way they practice obviously this fluency issue, and they also practice towards retelling the lecture. And the challenge number 3 that is ahead of our students as far as speaking is concerned. Students may struggle to find the right words to express themselves or to speak at a natural pace, right? So this refers back to what I said at the beginning, that the role of the teacher is to provide your students, when it comes to getting them ready for the test, provide students with some specific vocabulary, specific phrases that are necessary for some specific exam tasks. And here, let's have a look at the 4th tasks that tests speaking skill in the PTE academic. This is describe image. So there's an image that appears on the screen, and the test takers have to describe the image in detail. Obviously, the images will be of the kind that they come across in their academic life. So that would be, I know, maps, some charts, graphs, typically. So they have to get ready to describe this kind of images. And the traits that are tested are obviously oral fluency, the same elements that we have already discussed. There's also pronunciation that is assessed here. So again, the same elements. So is it easily understandable, vowels and consonants pronounced native-like way, and words and phrases stressed correctly? So these are those elements that we have discussed. And content. Here, as far as the image description is concerned, this element of assessment, this criteria of assessment would be the question whether all aspects and elements of the image are addressed in what has been said. Does the response deal with all elements of the image? Or are there relationships, possible developments included in this image description? Is there any conclusion or implication? So some strategies for this kind of task. Obviously, it's very important to work with a lot of images with them and show them that the first crucial skill for this task is to analyze images in detail. So get an images and work with them, answer as many questions as possible: who, where, how, which. So ask them really a lot of questions about images. Teach them to organize the talk, like how they can introduce the image, how they can give the information on the main body, and then how to conclude. So they have to start with introduction. They should use full sentences, a range of vocabulary, linking devices when describing that. They should be taught to give as many details as possible. And obviously, they might speculate and conclude at the end. So because they, at the end, they're supposed to conclude the image description. An idea for some activity to introduce, again, the element of fun, competition, and at the same time, especially this one will be working on some vocabulary here, because obviously for image description, there will be a set of phrases, expressions, words that would be extremely useful when describing an image. And this is, you can easily Google those phrases. Like if you Google describe image phrases, you will find a lot of them. And you can equip your students with this kind of expressions. It's much obviously better than memorizing ready scripts here, because, well, this is what we are preparing our students for. We are preparing for functioning in an academic situation, an academic life. They will be asked in their academic practice, they will be asked to describe a lot of different kinds of images that of the kind that we have seen. So it's much better for your students, for the students to be equipped with some set of expressions, linking devices that will help them, rather than obviously preparing some memorized scripts. So you Google describe image phrases, you prepare a grid just like you can see in the screen, and you cut out cards. Each card contains one phrase, one word that will be helpful to describe an image. Like, for example, I know what is interesting here is, provides information about, it highlights. So each card contains a separate phrase, and then you deal out the cards to students. So, for example, for example, you can have a group of 3 students, and they will each of them will get a set of cards with some phrases to describe an image. So then you provide them with an image. You can take it from some past papers, for example, and then they can play the card game. The card game is, well, their idea is to get rid of the cards as quickly as they can. But there's just one condition. If they want to get rid of a card, they have to use a sentence. I mean, use this phrase in a sentence, and the sentence must refer to the image that is lying in front of them. So this is what they will be doing. They will be getting rid of the card and producing some sentences containing the expressions from the cards that they have. And obviously the winner will be the person who, well, first gets rid of all the cards they have. So we've been discussing three challenges that the speakers, the learners might face when delivering or when dealing with speaking tasks in generally with any speaking task, but especially with speaking task in PTE academic. Those were the challenge number one was pronunciation, like pronouncing each correct sounds, stress, rhythm, and intonation. Then another challenge would be making what they say smooth and constant, so that they excel at oral fluency criterion. And the third challenge that we discussed was the lack of vocabulary, proper phrases that they can use to express themselves clearly. With this last slide, I'd like to invite you to another session in which we're going to discuss reading challenges that will be held on the 13th of June, as you can see, 2 p.m. IST, Indian Standard Time. And obviously, I invite you to go and, see our social media, where you can find a lot of tips and a lot of ideas. Also, the website also will give you a lot of information on the assessment, for example, on the format of the tasks. If you're new to PTE academic, because I suppose that there are a lot of you who are very experienced PTE academic teachers. Let me now have a look at Q&A if there's anything that I might address. So there is, for example, a question, not all Indian, Indonesian or Myanmar students could have watched English movies. How do we guide them? Obviously, this is something that is connected with listening challenges. We're going to cover listening challenges and discuss that a little bit later, and so I will refer to that. Obviously, this listening in PTE academic is quite specific, right? This is listening within academic context, so this is a little bit different kind of listening, obviously, than just films and dynamic dialogues with typically quite informal English. There is also best size for PTE practice. Obviously, if you go to PTE academic website, you will find also some links to some material, a lot of material that you can use to practice for PTE academic. So use it and feel free. Right. There is a question about certificate, but I'm not sure if you will receive that. Sophie will maybe join in or answer the question.
Just to say that everybody will get an email by tomorrow at the latest with the recording, a short survey, which is literally like 2 or 3 minutes to fill in 5 questions for us so that we can evaluate the webinar and see if it's delivering the content you need. And then once you have filled in the survey, you'll get a link to download your certificate and you'll be able to add your own name and then print that off.
Okay, there's this question about also the pronunciation of homophones, because I discussed minimal pairs, and there's this question of phonemes that computers usually confuse them. Obviously, computers might confuse them in the tools that that we use on an everyday basis, like, for example, dictating tools. But the artificial intelligence that deals with assessing performance here is very well trained, and also homophones can be easily identified through the context in which the word is used. So with well-trained artificial intelligence, you don't make mistakes. I mean, the well-trained artificial intelligence doesn't make mistakes here. What happens when a candidate fails to start from the beginning word and starts from, say, third or fourth word in a repeat sentence? Well, obviously, that is treated as omission, right? So the score will be surely taken down. That's why I somehow emphasized this element of focus, that you can, when preparing a students, turn their attention, especially when this repeat sentence, they really have to stay focused, because any kind of distraction here might result in taking the score down, like the situation that you mentioned, like they start with the third or fourth word instead of the first, because they simply were not focused enough. So highlight this element of focus with your students, especially when it's a repeat sentence, because there are just a few words. This is a moment, but once they are not focused and they lose one or two words, that the score will be taken down, obviously. So if some students are not even able to understand what is spoken, what can be the initial strategy for teaching? Obviously, if you have such students, it would be very helpful when you start with them. That would be very helpful to start with the correlation between what they see and what they hear, right? So if, for example, you can prepare a set of short, simple sentences, for example, which they can read out, right? And with them, you ask them, you say the sentences, for example, you can do it yourself, right? You say the sentences and you ask them to repeat, and they can read the sentence at the same time, right? When you are pronouncing, when you are saying the sentence, they can see that, they can read it, and then they repeat from with the text in front of their eyes. And after some time, for example, so you prepare 10 sentences like that, you practice it this way. So you say the sentence, they repeat while reading the sentence. And you can get back, like, let's say next class, you can get back to the same sentences, but this time try and don't give them the text, but just simply say the sentences. So they have already seen the sentences, they have already connected, let's say, the text and the sound, and now they can recreate it from memory, and they will hear only the words. So this way you can practice listening skills, although we will be discussing listening skills obviously later on, but this way you can practice listening with really low level students. So you start with this showing them the connection between what they read and what they hear, so they can see the words. Right, there's a question if there's any tip to improve repeat sentence. I would say that the most important tip, I was trying to highlight that, I would say that the most important tip for me is teach your students not to repeat mechanically. You can practice that in class. Take some sentences with you to the class, or take sentences from the text that you're working with, and read out and show them chunks, right? Show them sensible or meaningful chunks in the sentences, and help them in understanding the chunks, the groups of words, rather than each word individually and mechanically repeating that. That would be very important. But again, something that we will get back to. There's a question, what about using templates in describe image and retell lecture? Few students, the question from Mir, few students want to use templates considering and following the topic or question. Will that impact getting a good mark? I mean, to put things clear, it's when we say template, we mean here some kind of, well, organizing what they say. So being able to give the introduction, give the main body in, and conclude what they say. So this is what I understand by template, and equipping your students with really good vocabulary, good expressions, good phrases, to well, either retell lecture or describe image, because this is where they provide where they produce a little bit longer speeches. So that's definitely a good strategy. Show them how they structure what they say, how they can open, how they can give the main details, and how they can conclude, and equip them with really good quality vocabulary, and that will certainly improve the final mark. The webinar, there's a remark from Rita, the webinar seems to tell us that reading and pronunciation have very important roles in speaking. I mean, obviously pronunciation does have a role in speaking, that's clear, right? It's very important. It's one of the traits, one of the three traits that is assessed. This reading element here, well, we talked a little bit about reading, especially read aloud, because actually, this is how PTE Academic works. PTE Academic combines skills, right? So the most tasks, when you look at it, actually combine skills. We were focusing on speaking, but obviously, like repeat sentence is obviously, or the retell lecture, it's obviously combined with listening, right? So because this is what we do in real life, we do not use skills separately. We use skills in combination in our native languages as well. We combine skills, and this is what is happening in PTE Academic. PTE Academic actually somehow imitates what is happening in real life in an academic context, obviously. There's a question from Mohandeep. Can you provide the material for activities suggested, as well as these ideas are quite interesting and informative? And obviously this session has been recorded, and you will be provided with the link to the recording, so you can get back to any activities here. Okay, there's a question about websites as well. So obviously, as I mentioned, you will the great source of material will be PTE Academic website, and you will find links to a lot of material to work with your students. Another question about templates, right? There's a question about some speaking activities that students can do at home on their own. Well, I mentioned that, for example, you can incorporate the speaking at home into your class. You can ask your students to record what they say. Any kind of recording is a good idea. So always when students approach me and ask me what I can do at home to improve my speaking, so one of my first tips would be, well, start recording yourself, right? So for example, imagine that you have to report some lecture on a specific topic, and you simply record it. So you get used to this recording, and you can then later on listen to your report, and you can, well, identify, for example, problems in what you said, like pronunciation problems, fluency problems. So generally, I would say that recording anything of any kind of speaking at home would be a good idea. So right, so we have been discussing for over an hour now. If there are any unanswered questions here, I can obviously get back to that. You can email the organizers, or you can email me directly. I will put my email into the chat. So if you want, and anything has been unanswered, just feel free to contact me, and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay, so thanks a lot for today's meeting. Once again, remember that we are meeting for the reading challenges on the 13th of June, 2 p.m. IST time. So thank you very much for today, and see you in June. Thanks. Bye-bye.